This game wants to be the Silent Hill that PT never was so bad that it practically starts with the same friggin' shot of this door, not to mention it literally has the room from Silent Hill for the room. Visage is a first-person psychological horror game from indie developer SadSquare Studios that absolutely took advantage of the cancellation of Kojima's Silent Hills project to give players a taste of what we can only assume would have been Silent Hills. Now, to be honest, in no way do I think Silent Hills would have been like this for the full game. There would have been combat, exploration of Silent Hill itself as opposed to being stuck in a house for the game's entirety, and there would have been some depressed characters and even more depressing revelations, including that of Norman Reedus, and with a star like that attached as a protagonist, it probably would have been third person, let's be honest. Visage doesn't have any of that except for perhaps the depressing part, so to call it a Silent Hill wannabe is kind of misguiding, as this is what I would call PT extra large. PT was a terrifying tech demo that launched on the PS4 a few years ago and worked incredibly well within its short but sweet length, and that the whole thing being a puzzle within itself and the mystery of what the hell was going on was the catch before its true nature was revealed. It wasn't your typical game, but I would say more of an event. Now, trying to convert that experience into a full game here with Visage pulls it off for the most part if you're looking for some chills and thrills, but it is seriously held back from being great due to some incredibly poor and downright tedious game design. Set in a large suburban house that only seems to get larger as you discover its haunting secrets, we play as Dwayne, a silent protagonist who has his own dark secrets as we explore the melancholic histories of the previous occupants. Is it the house? Or is everyone just off their fucking nut? Let's find out. My name is Naj and welcome to the broadcast. This is my review for Visage. If you like the video, give me a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel to catch all my upcoming videos. Thanks a bunch. Labelled on the box as a psychological horror game, what Visage does well is being exactly that when it comes to taking those words at face value. The game starts in what is a very morbid scene with you executing your own wife and kids like they are Nazi war criminals, before popping off the final shot in your own head. We then awake in a room as we begin to explore the house, following in the footsteps of its previous occupants by interacting with certain objects that somehow relates to that previous occupant and their particular story. What is immediately evident from the get-go is that Visage is not a game for the faint-hearted. Already we've taken out a fast-track divorce, and as we explore the dark shifting corridors, I found it to be a very tense and anxiety-inducing game. With emphasis on the word psychological, much of the horror comes from the darkness and the unknown, at least in the early stages of the game. I didn't know what to expect, and well, most of the time it was absolutely nothing except my own brain telling me, you know something's gonna jump out. Right? And for a good while it relies on the player's imagination to create its scares, and if your mind is anything like mine, it can be pretty terrifying. But of course a horror game can only tease you for so long before you realise nothing is actually going to happen, and this is where Visage banged me like a drum, as just as I thought I was out, they pull me back in, as the scares started ramping up with actual paranormal activity and ghostly trails as I experienced the stories. There are 4 stories in the game to explore, 3 previous events and the one that is currently going on with Dwayne. They can be done in any order for the most part, depending on which items you find first to activate the narratives, and once selected, you cannot end that particular plot until you have completed it. Each story kind of changes the house in its own way. One, for example, sees you going through multiple different mirrors in a particular order to using nothing but a massive sledgehammer to get through the mirrors as you struggle to navigate this weird and abstract house. One particular story revolving around a young girl was incredibly captivating, and I was so intrigued as to what tragedy occurred that I was glued to the screen. It was very interesting stuff, and I joke you not. There was one jump scare that I will not spoil here, but it got me so good that I thought I popped a friggin' hemorrhoid. Had to slip a cheeky finger in to make sure no goods were loose. But a game can be as scary as all the follow-up sneezes, but most of the time this isn't enough to actually make a good game, and this is where Visage gradually started to crumble over the course of my 7 or 8 hour playthrough. Which, by the way, will vary massively depending on your patience and ability to think so far outside of the box that you forgot you were ever in a box in the first place. The core gameplay will have you exploring the house, collecting items to piece together the history of the house to ultimately discover the fate of your character. The overall story is episodic in the different pasts of the residents, and some are arguably more enjoyable than others. There is nothing you haven't seen before in the game, so it does rely heavily on these stories to remain engaging, which I think it does for the most part, and I say there is nothing you have not seen before. It does borrow a lot of mechanics from other successful horror games, so if this isn't your first rodeo in the genre, you know what to expect. You have your sanity meter, similar to that from the Amnesia titles, and it works in the same way in that your sanity is replenished, or depleted, depending on how you look at it. Basically, light will keep you sane. The more light you produce, the saner you will be. Spend too long in the dark and you will slowly start to go insane. The more your sanity meter, in the form of this little brain here, fills, the more paranormal events will occur in the house. Doors opening and closing, ghostly figures creeping from under the beds, lights turning themselves off, and the more your sanity decreases, the more this will happen, eventually leading to your death. To prevent this, you collect lighters to light candles around the house, light bulbs for lamps or lights on the wall. That is if the curveball of no electricity in the house isn't thrown, which it is for a good chunk of the game at a certain point. The candles have the mechanic of, well, burning down when they are lit, so cannot always be relied upon. You can use a lighter to see slightly in front of you in desperate times, but this does not help your sanity, nor is it good for the gas in the lighter. The sanity mechanic, which is a huge part of the exploration in the game, sounds great on paper. I mean, well, it is even good in practice, as seen in Amnesia: The Dark Descent, but here in Visage I found it to be very sporadic as to whether it actually worked as intended. Countless times I found myself standing in the light to prevent or reduce my sanity from depleting, but it just wouldn't work. I would stand in front of a TV or a candle, something I would call a legitimate light source, and it wouldn't help in the slightest. If your sanity does get too high, there are pills you need to take, as these are the only way to help once you reach a certain point of crazy. It did, at least for me, seem pretty inconsistent as to when the sanity meter would fill, and vice versa. Having to collect lighters and pills, there is an inventory system. To be exact, one for usable or consumable items to take the edge off, and another for key or story related items. The story related items can be dropped, and if they are important to progress, they will appear in the storage cupboard in the basement should you lose it, which is pretty helpful, and this will be things such as the sledgehammer I mentioned earlier, and some various other tools you may need to progress through the story at certain points. The inventory system itself, though, is a damn pain in the ass to use. Fiddly, and it takes a while to get used to, especially when trying to swap hands or even put stuff down or away. Can feel like a puzzle within itself early on. I played the game on an Xbox, so it may be easier on PC, but even with the controller I felt there must have been some easier button inputs to program than this. But hey, a decent horror game with somewhat clunky controls and not quite perfect mechanics isn't something I'll tell you to avoid. In fact, this game is a recommendation based on the fact it has some interesting plots and that I'm still trying to get that hemorrhoid back in, but it comes with a warning. Your own sanity will at times rapidly decrease because the gameplay of solving its many puzzles will at times infuriate you, which raises a question. Are horror games becoming too artificially difficult due to their puzzle design being so vague and at times downright illogical? This is something that I've thought about a few times with recent horror titles. I mean, PT itself was somewhat of a how the fuck was I supposed to know that game? To actually finish the PT demo, you had to plug in a headset and whisper, "Martha," into the mic 3 times at a certain point in the loop. Whoever the first person to work that one out without Google search probably runs a school for mutants from his wheelchair, and in Visage, they go for the same hair-pulling tactic of ambiguity. Countless times I would walk through every single corridor and every single room, searching in what I thought was every nook and cranny, hoping to find something to help me progress. I would spend what felt like hours searching for something, and what that something was, I wouldn't even know. I am not kidding when I say, had I not googled a walkthrough at certain points, I would not have finished this game. Nor would I finish any other game because my TV would have a fist-sized hole through it. Objectives are often left to you to discover, and a lot of the time it would be clear once you entered a room and saw something obviously different or out of place, but there were a good few times I had absolutely no clue and the game wasn't giving me anything. I recently reviewed a game called Tormented Souls, which was incredible, but admittedly it had the same problems. Puzzles that had not much real logical sense to them, that at times it kind of killed the pacing and would give a false sense of difficulty. A good difficult puzzle is something that you have to calculate or solve yourself with the means of a solution at your fingertips. Visage often blurs the line of that, which prevents this game from being a great tribute to the games it aspires to be. I'm curious as to what others thought who have played this game or any other game in this genre recently. Are they getting unnecessarily difficult? Or am I just fucking stupid? Every single time I entered the kitchen, I would open the fridge to think that I would find something in there, but I never did. One time I was stuck for friggin' ages. I opened that fridge door about 5 times, and after I googled it, I found I had to open the fridge, crouch in front of it, look right to the back, take out a carton of milk, take this to a mug in the corner of the kitchen that looked like nothing more than a background prop, put the milk in it, then get a tea bag out of the drawer, and make a nice cup of tea to progress. I don't know if I was being thick, missing a clue, or something obvious to indicate this, but I was stumped. I was so annoyed. You know that feeling you get when you Google a puzzle solution and once you know it, you think, of course, how stupid of me for looking. Nah, none of that here. I was annoyed because I knew the only way to progress was to Google it, and that, my friends, is poor game design. And I don't know about you friends, but the last thing I would think to do whilst trying to escape a very haunted house is, where did I put that last damn PG tip?